Welcome, and thank you for joining Sociologists for Palestine for another event featuring a panel entitled Connected Histories, Palestine and Escalating Israeli Aggression. My name is Roy Livneh. I'm from the Department of Sociology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I'm the panel's moderator. Before we begin, I would like to extend my gratitude to Claire Decotto, Jess Hardy, Andy Clarno, Luis Loris, and the many other outstanding, competent, and dedicated organizers from Sociologists for Palestine who envisioned this event and made it happen. I would also like to thank the three terrific panelists who are joining us today from Beirut, Saida, and Minnesota for what promises to be a fascinating conversation. A year into a devastating, still ongoing genocide, and months into what the UN declared a widespread famine in northern Gaza, it is clear that the day of October 7, 2023 will be remembered as a major transformative event in the history of Palestine and the Middle East more generally. And yet, as Bill Sewell famously observed, historic events such as October 7 have to be analyzed as outcomes of far broader and enduring social structures. These social structures create the social and historical conditions that eventually lead to ruptures, such as the one we all witnessed on October 7. No less interestingly, and no less importantly, they can also explain why particular moments in history are looked upon and remembered as historic events, put on the front stage of history, and earn an iconic status, while other occurrences are sidelined, forgotten, or otherwise seen as subsidiary aftermath or build-up to the main event. Consider this example. In a speech given in Detroit last week, Vice President and presidential hopeful Kamala Harris said that, quote, "The first and most tragic story is October 7 and what happened that day, and only then what has happened since," end of quote. The statement by Vice President Harris ignored the long history of occupation and oppression that led to October 7. As many of us mention frequently, October 7 did not begin on October 7. But more than that, Ms. Harris defined October 7 as the central historic event and the genocide that followed as a footnote. Let's repeat this point, this time with numbers. Vice President Harris was saying that the murder of 39 Israeli children by Hamas on October 7 was a historic event, whereas the murder of 17,000 Palestinian children by Israel since, and over 200 Palestinian children in the 10 months prior to October 7, were both non-events. The story, of course, is not about Ms. Harris, who is only one actor, albeit a relatively powerful one, within a global structure that discounts Palestinian lives and elevates Israeli ones. And I would suggest that a potential antidote to this structure is sociology and its power to develop contextualized histories. By contextualized histories, I do not only mean that we should start telling the story of the past year before October 7. This would be important, crucial, but not enough. I mean, rather, that we should think of Palestine in general, and Gaza in particular, as entangled in a much bigger context, a dense political and historical web of global and imperial forces that can speak volumes to what has transpired over the past year and where the entire region will go from here. Consider this. In 2018, in an interview with the Italian journalist Francesca Borri, Hamas leader, now deceased, Yahya Sinwar, said the following: "I'm not saying I won't fight anymore. I'm saying that I don't want war anymore. I want the end of the siege. You walk to the beach at sunset and you see all those teenagers on the shore chatting and wondering what the world looks like across the sea, what life looks like. It's breaking and should break everybody. I want them free." This is an unlikely statement from a person who 6 years later launched the October 7 attack. Some would quickly dismiss the statement as manipulative. Here we have a militant who, by the time he was giving this interview, was already responsible for the killing of dozens of Palestinians in Gaza, poetizing about children who look at the sunset and wonder about the big world out there. What dismissing this statement so quickly would ignore, however, is that Mr. Sinwar was speaking to Ms. Borri, as he was speaking to Ms. Bori, he was receiving tens of millions of dollars annually from Israel and Qatar, and was recognized by Netanyahu as an asset, an alternative to the government in Ramallah, who would sustain the political divisions in the Palestinian society. Indeed, at the time, many people in Gaza saw Sinwar as a normalizer of sorts, not quite a collaborator, but a person who was co-opted and used by a political system of global proportions, which maintained a devastating status quo. In the years that have passed since 2018, the status quo solidified and became unbearable to the people of Gaza. The Abraham Accords, initiated by the Trump administration and readily embraced by Mr. Biden, laid out an international network of economic and political interests connecting American capital, the Israeli arms industry, and Saudi and Emirati oil. Palestine was not part of these accords. The Abraham Accords opening declaration did not mention Palestine even once, or even at a hint. And the bilateral agreements between Israel and Morocco, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Sudan expressed the most vague and general support in, quote, continuing the effort to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This agreement did not express support, even declarative support, in ending the occupation, but only in continuing an effort. What the Accords did do is to establish a coalition of extremist countries and leaders centered around the axes of Trump, Mohammed bin Salman, and Netanyahu, a Pax Americana with Pseudo-Zionist characteristics. The blockade on Gaza, back then the blockade was 11 years old, by now it's 17 years old, and Israel's periodic deadly attacks on Gaza's population were set to continue, not as major strategic geopolitical decisions of this American coalition, but as a footnote of history. Gaza was sidelined, rendered unimportant and irrelevant. The intended outcome was transforming whatever Israel would do in Gaza into a non-event, until, to paraphrase Max Weber, the last ton of Saudi fossil fuel would burn. The actual outcome was October 7. Looking at things this way, it seems like October 7, 2023 was a brief, if significant moment buried in a far longer, bloody, and cynical history that had begun way before October 7 and will continue long after. The build-up to October 7 should not be traced in the tunnel below Rafah, but in the golden ornaments of palaces in Riyadh, Washington, and Mar-a-Lago. Like the build-up, the aftermath of October 7 remains global in character. It should not surprise anyone that Israel's retaliation has long gone beyond the narrow borders of the Gaza Strip, reaching into the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran, and that the entire region is now embroiled in an escalation that has no end in sight. We're lucky to host three exceptional panelists here, two sociologists and one anthropologist who have written a lot about the countries, societies, and people who have been embroiled in this deadly historical period. I will introduce each of them in turn before they speak. They will speak for about 15 minutes, and we will then have a moderated Q&A. Our first speaker is Professor Rima Majid from the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Media Studies at the American University of Beirut. Professor Majid studies social movements, sectarianism, conflict and violence, and gender and intersectionality in the Middle East. Her work has appeared in journals such as Social Forces, Mobilization, as well as numerous other venues. And she has also written and appeared in numerous media outlets speaking about politics and society in Lebanon and beyond. So the mic is yours, Rima.
Thank you so much, Roy, for this excellent introduction and for the generous invitation. And thank you to everyone that put this panel together and all the effort that is being done in Sociologists for Palestine. It's really, it's been a very long time since I felt that a sense of belonging to ASA or American sociology. So that's really a great initiative. So in the 15 minutes I have, what I'll try to do is I'll try to get across 10 main points about what is happening today. I'll start by trying to offer what Roy was talking about, a very short contextualized history of this conflict. So as many of you know, this, we've been hearing this for the past year. This war did not start on October 7. Actually, I would even say that this is a war for the continuation of the Zionist project in this region that goes beyond it being a war on any nation state per se, whether it's Lebanon or Palestine, of course, or Syria, which are all countries that have land that is occupied. Of course, Palestine is the center of this, project. But this is a project that continues a Zionist project in the region that knows actually no borders. So it's important to start by saying that Israel is an expansionist entity. It has no declared or recognized borders. And it has a history of invasion and occupation. And what we have been seeing is only an increase in settlements in Palestine and an increase in, an overt declaration of intentions to settle, whether in South Lebanon or other parts of this geography. The links between Lebanon and Palestine are many, specifically that these borders are borders that are around 100 years old. For many, the geography of South Lebanon, Jabal Amil, has, the center of Jabal Amil has always been Haifa rather than Beirut. So the people of the South have these links to Palestine that date back centuries. And, there's a history and a geography there that links Lebanon to Palestine and in various ways. Although today we are talking about the imminent danger of yet another invasion and occupation of the South, it's important also to mention that Israel's aggression on Lebanon did not start, with the creation of Hezbollah. The aggressions on Lebanon actually did not stop since the inception of the Israeli entity. So although Israel has invaded Lebanon for the first time in 1978, it has aggressed Lebanon repeatedly in previous years. And the occupation of Lebanon that lasted the longest was the occupation that started the invasion of 1982, when Israelis arrived all the way to Beirut and occupied, made a lot of land in South Lebanon. And that invasion and occupation lasted 18 years. The last point about the relationship between Lebanon and Palestine or Palestinians is that, there is Palestine and Lebanon in many ways, in the sense that there are Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, and there are Palestinians living in Lebanon that have been expelled from their land since the Nakba. And that live in dire situation in Lebanon, and that are still fighting for their right to return. So in that sense, Lebanon is really at the core of this conflict. And Israel's interests in Lebanon are neither new nor imagined. We've seen these aggressions and occupations over and again. So in that sense, the war we're witnessing today is not really a reaction to anything any faction could have done, whether we agree with it or not, but rather a continuation of aggressive action that has been ongoing for decades. Of course, in Palestine, way more than in Lebanon, but nonetheless, it's unfolding on the geography of this region in different intensities. So what I'm trying to say is that Israeli occupation of Lebanon has preceded the existence of Hezbollah. It's the same thing with the arguments in Gaza and Hamas. Actually, Hezbollah was created as a reaction to the Israeli invasion of 1982. So in that sense, any potential resistance to the settler colonial project of Israel is going to be perceived as a terrorist threat and is going to be fought. And we've seen this with the leftist resistance, with the Arab nationalist resistance, and with all the variations of resistances we've seen in this region historically. So this is not about political Islam per se. I mean, despite what we might think about it, but this is really about the implementation of the Zionist settler colonial project in the region. And I say this again, not to protect Hezbollah or Hamas from any criticism. And I think the most relevant criticism for these entities comes from within the region. But I say this to mention the complexity of grappling with this war, especially within the context of the past few years in Lebanon, where there's been an uprising, where Hezbollah has participated in governments that are responsible for corruption. So I note all of these. I note this complexity and that criticism. But I think the important point here is that this is a case where the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. And that is very important to remember. So let me be clear. What I'm saying is that there's actually, I mean, despite all the criticism we might have, there is no symmetry in this genocidal, destructionist war. When I say there's no symmetry, I don't only mean this in military terms, but I also mean this in political terms. What we have seen in the past year has exposed the depth of a racial global system that perceives us and our lives as disposal and less worthy than those of Israelis. So this region has become really a point of intensification of this global system of imperialism and ugliness that is embodied by the Abraham Accord and other, we can talk about the details of what has been unfolding at the regional level. But this is really to highlight, these double standards. We keep hearing today about the goal of returning Israel, from the Lebanese front. What we keep hearing is that they're fighting Hezbollah because they want to return the 60,000 displaced settlers to their north. But we don't hear the same outcry from the US government or the European governments or those that defend them about the 1.3 million displaced Lebanese people that have been displaced in less than a week, or the almost 2 million displaced Gazans since last week. So what are these double standards? We keep hearing Europeans and US officials talking about Israel's right to defend itself. Does Lebanon or Palestine have the right to defend itself? Would they allow Lebanon to use the same tactics of war that Israel is using to defend itself against the clear aggressions from Israel? Will they fund it and arm it the same way? Of course not. So this is what I'm trying to highlight, this broader structure that we, of course, as sociologists study all the time. This is really what we mean when we talk about racial capitalism today, or when we talk about what imperialism means. But this is also what terrorism means, and that is state terrorism. So today we are living in a world where fascist claims, where we hear the German foreign minister justifying the killing of civilians. I'm sorry, this is fascism, right? So we live in a world today that normalizes the killing of hundreds of thousands of civilians in the name of the right of defending a settler colonial state. And that is actually a very, very dangerous moment historically at the global level, not just for the people of this region. If we let this happen without very clear condemnation, we are headed as a planet to catastrophe. So on this point, I want to insist that this is actually not a war at this point anymore between Israel and Palestine or Lebanon, or let alone it being a war between Israel and Hezbollah or Hamas, which is how it's always framed in the media. But it's become very clear that this is also a U.S. war. This is a war that the United States is participating in fully in terms of funding, of arming, of diplomatic backing. And again, in terms of technology, which is an aspect that is interesting and important maybe for us to discuss later, but the new technology that is deployed in this war, whether when we think about just the magnitude of the operation of the talkie-walkies and the pagers, it feels like a video game. And it looks like this is the future of, video game is the future of warfare that becomes televised material for consumption and then media fatigue, right? So I also want to say, and that's my fifth point, I still have two other points and then I'll stop. The fifth point is I want to say a word of critique on the approaches that are based on humanitarianism. I mean, especially in those of us who are trying to organize, when we want to avoid politics, there are many that feel safer just talking about the humanitarian aspect. I think we should categorically reject that. This is not a natural disaster. This is a political disaster. People are not being killed or displaced, by a hurricane. So we have to insist that this is a political this is a political catastrophe and not just a humanitarian one. And in that sense, I think because the humanitarian approach is at this point, and like every other war, focuses only on bare life. It only focuses on the survival of the so-called victims, right? We completely disregard and actually don't care about their social lives, the disruption of social life in these places, the disruption of dreams, the disruption of plans, the disruptions of families, the disruptions of what all these things that make up a society. And we also do not highlight that this humanitarianism usually comes from the very same countries that are selling arms to Israel and making billions of US dollars in profit. So what we actually get in terms of aid is peanuts compared to what, the arms industry is making in terms of profit. So this has become a very, hypocritical way of approaching. And I think, I mean, at this point, humanitarianism has become very dehumanizing for the people of this region. This other point before I wrap up that I want to make is, since I was asked to focus a bit on Lebanon, is that today we hear a lot about the danger of playing the sectarian card in Lebanon. The French Minister of Foreign Affairs just a few days ago said that France is worried about Lebanon slipping into a civil war. There's a lot of tension internally. It's a sectarianized country. We are hearing a lot of tension with the question of displacement. And Israel is playing on this card very clearly. So Israel is starting to target, for example, Christian areas where Shia displaced people have moved to, under the pretext that there are Hezbollah members amongst them. Which has led to a backlash from the local communities that are now refusing to host people from, specifically Shia, from South Lebanon or the Bekaa. So Israel is intentionally doing this. It's intentionally playing this card. And it's very important for us to keep that in mind. And on this point, I want to say that, I mean, this international and regional, what we've been hearing the past week about all these diplomats that are worried about a civil war. I think it's important, and we know this as political sociologists, wars are not slippages. No one slips into a war, right? A war is a political decision. It's not a social explosion. It's not a revolution. It's not that society gets to the point where, we will just, people will just start a civil war and kill each other. The war needs funding and arming and leadership, and that will and political backing. So a civil war will only happen when there is a green light for it. And my worry is that the fact that we are hearing more and more about it from diplomats, it means that they're discussing it. So that again takes us back to the structure of this global system. So at the end, I want to wrap up by saying that what we've seen in the past month in Lebanon has been, a tragic decapitation of leadership of an organization called Hezbollah. That happens to be more than just a resistance movement, but it's also a political organization. I mean, it's Hezbollah is a very complex organization, but and some are thinking that by killing leaders we can stop a movement. Actually, neither the literature and social movement nor the history of this part of the world tells us that this is true. actually, as long as there is occupation, as long as there's settler colonialism, there will always be resistance in one way or the other. I mean, the resistance is not going to disappear. It might transform into something else, but it will not disappear. So since many in this audience are in the US or based in the US, I think as sociologists, anthropologists, people in social sciences and humanities, if we stand in our institutions and do land recognitions and acknowledgement gestures, but we are unable to take a clear position against land grabbing and settler colonialism in today's world, then there is, I think, a very, very deep moral crisis. And actually, I think that people of this region, we are not material for future history. We are humans in today's world. And as sociologists, I think we need to stand on the right side of this conflict if we want to be conscientious, if we want to have a conscience as sociologists today. So I'll stop here, and I look forward to a discussion with all of you.
Thank you very much, Rima. That was extremely powerful. Before I continue, I was being asked to remind the audience that you can already write in questions using the Q&A icon on the bottom of the Zoom window, right here in the middle below me. And I'll now move to introducing our next speaker, who probably needs no introduction. Professor Salih Hanafi is also a sociologist from the American University in Beirut. He is among the very most prominent sociologists in the Middle East, an author and co-author of several books and numerous articles on topics as diverse as the sociology of religion, morality, Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, and knowledge production in the Arab world. Until recently, Professor Hanafi was president of the International Sociological Association, and he is also a renowned and well-regarded public sociologist who published about the Middle East, Lebanon, and Gaza in numerous media outlets worldwide.
Thank you so much, Roy, and I'm glad to talk after you and Rima. In fact, that you mentioned many important points that I can escape and go forward. If you like, I would divide my talk into my impression, if you like, reflection in 1 year since October 7, but then something about the future, if you like. I am interested to say a few words. So, sociologically speaking, the Palestinian-led October 7 attack is a tragic act of resistance to a protracted process of colonization. Let us portray the scene from 1 day earlier, 6 October. What is this scene? Israelis not only enjoying their life, stealing Palestinian land, and have their own roads, cities, villages, and settlements in a perfect apartheid system, while the Palestinian under the everyday machine of killing, in addition of living under occupation in the Palestinian territories, and particularly in the 16 years long siege of Gaza ghetto. So actually, particularly since 2000, when the Israeli government decided not to implement the Oslo process and engaged instead in violently crushing the Second Intifada, occupying the West Bank and the siege of Gaza, it's a wishful thinking to expect the Palestinian resistance to be beautiful. So let me quote recently a beautiful words from Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Occupied Palestinian Territories. She said about 7 October, an unlawful act of resistance doesn't make the resistance unlawful. Palestinians' right to resist is inherent to their right to exist as a people. And however, or by contrast, an unlawful act of unlawful occupation make the occupation more unlawful. And of course, the list on the desk of the ICC prosecutor is much, much longer than that. So, so if you like, how to frame this war? If you like, in early 2000, I wrote an article which really become translated into many languages about spacocide. I frame the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the Israeli settler colonial practice as a spacocide. It means targeting land for the purpose of rendering it unlivable to foster the inevitable voluntary transfer of the Palestinian population. I use this word spacocide to say it's not really genocide. I counted casualties, death of Palestinian and Arab and Israelis from 1948 until 2000. It was almost 100,000. But after 2000, where Israel is not anymore have any justification, the peace process become simply a process. They become very violent. And of course, with the transformation, ideological transformation of a fringe of the Israeli society, if you like, the surge of the religious Zionism, if you like. But so what I wanted to say that in fact here where the genocide is before October 7. I use OCHA, the UN statistics about the Palestinian versus Israeli casualties from 2008 until the eve of October 7. It was the ratio is 21 times. It means every Israeli killed, you have 21 Palestinian killed, without talking about many things. Of course, West Bank is reoccupied. 60% they is still under the Israeli zone B or C. So if you like, this is how we understand why Israel become very, very violent. And of course, it was the occasion of October 7 to show us how genocidal this settler colonial power. And I think Rima eloquently talked about this. So I will escape this. So what I'm interested to say now that in fact the genocide is not only against Palestinian people, against the universality of human rights, is against genocidal studies. I mean, genocidal studies become like a farce. It's a study to study genocide after coup. Once it's done, people are graphically seeing the genocide in their TV every day, and then we have, as Rima mentioned, the German foreign minister say this is justifiable. It's only the right of Israeli to defense. So I think this is what we are in front. Let me say something really important also, that in the Palestinian camp, if you like, also we have a problem of division. Of course, we have a problem that this camp is backed by Iran. Iran, like United States, like some Gulf country, Egypt, were a major actor of paralyzing the Arab Spring. They kill Syrians, Yemeni, and others. Of course, again, I'm not only saying Iran. So if you like, we have from the other side, the side of if you like, the Palestinian side, a lot of really problem that we should factor in to understand, if you like, how come, if you like, particularly Hezbollah become very vulnerable to Israeli attacks. If you like, I mean, Hezbollah operation in Syria play a major role of, if you like, reveal the situation, the code, the communication, the sound, fingerprint, etc., etc. So let me say where we are. If you like, again, my thesis today to say that genocide is not against Palestinian people, against really the very liberal project, very liberal principles that really it was at certain point very important, like Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a basis to have a solidarity, to have some kind of encounter between different people, etc. If you like, that what this war show that how cheap for some Western power, I mean, particularly United States, maybe Canada, but also UK, France, Germany, this colonized life. If you like, just to give you an anecdote, I was in Oslo a few months ago giving a talk where somebody keeping insisting that the problem now that in Europe you have an increase of anti-Semitism. And he kept saying that this is, and I told him, of course there is, but I mean, what this sentiment compared to a genuine genocide against Gazayan people and currently against Lebanon. So I was unable to stop him before asking whether it is normal that during the Battle of Algiers in 1950s or German genocide in Namibia in 1905 to claim that Algerians were anti-French and Namibian were anti-German, or worse, the Algerian and Namibian were anti-Christian. So, if you like, this Eurocentric is horribly making genocide of any liberal value. And if you like, let me here make a clear statement against many liberal Jews, liberal scholars, liberal Israelis like Eva Illouz, and other Bernavi, the historian, that the problem now in Israel, the emergence of the religious Zionism. I need to make it clear that the problem today is not only the religious Zionism, and it's not true how they portray the conflict between two radicalism, religious movement of Hamas and religious Ben Ghafir. It's about how liberal Zionism mess up so much in this conflict. And recently I read amazing article of Muhammad Fadl, a constitutional jurist in Canada, who defined liberal Zionism as a recognition that Palestinians are victims of something. We don't know what, but that their victimhood demands only a human response, not a legal response in the light of general liberal principle of justice. This is the problem. This is why they still refuse to talk about any Palestinian sovereignty next to the Israeli sovereignty, or one state solution, a democratic secular state. So I really wanted to say how today liberalism is distorted by its own camp. It's not by the popular right wing, but by own camp. These liberals, they keep this refusing to analyze the Palestinian-Israeli conflict since 1947 as a settler colonial settler colonialism and apartheid system. This is, if you like, what make things make me very pessimistic today. Who are the interlocutor of Palestinian if really one day there is a pressure, international pressure against Israel to deliver something for the Palestinian? So this is, if you like, what is today a problem. So it's not true the problem of Zionism transformed into religious Zionism, but this very liberal Zionism is really a major problem for us. So let me finish by saying, look, I'm very pessimistic, and I think Israel will go most probably to a war of attrition. If you like, that last more 1 year. It's a continuous war. It's really it's a very occasion of all the imperialist power, United States and the European, if you like, to make a new order in this region against Iran, against the Palestinians. So they took it as an occasion. So I am very pessimistic in a short run. However, I feel that even if Hezbollah and Hamas took a major blow for their power, I think for the first time resistance went very horizontal. As Roy and Rima remind us, the social movement, this student movement everywhere is amazingly powerful, and I think one day we will see this generational gap between the old guard and this new blood, that maybe they will do a pressure to reach a kind of a justice solution for Palestine. So if you like, what I'm trying to say that in fact I think sociologically October 7 was inevitable. The humiliation that the Palestinian got. You know, the last 7 years, you don't have one resolution in UN to remind Israel that it's an occupying power, to denounce Israeli continuous colonization. So, if you like, Palestinian resistance succeed to put really the agenda on the Palestinian agenda on the table. Of course, with a heavy price for Gaza, for south of Lebanon people, but I think really justice deserve this sometimes this kind of price. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Professor Hanafi. We shall now move to our third speaker. Professor Sima Shahsari is an anthropologist from the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Professor Shahsari's work is situated at the intersection of transnational feminist theory, transnational sexuality studies, queer and transgender studies, Middle East studies, critical refugee studies, and political anthropology. They are the author of Politics of Rightful Killing, which came out, I believe, in Duke University Press in 2020. And they are now working on a second book, tentatively entitled Moving Queers and Queer Moves, Deterritorialization and Loned Life, which bases on an ethnography of queer and transgender Iranian refugees and a refugee rights organization.
Thank you so much, Roy, Claire, Jess, and Andy for making this possible. It's an honor to be on a panel with Professors Majed and Hanafi. A lot of what I wanted to say, of course, was discussed in particular, I would say, by Rima. And I agree with you, Rima, that land acknowledgements have become a chic, especially in US universities, and kind of a lip service. But I must acknowledge that I live on Dakota land in St. Paul, and the university that I work in is a land grant university, or as we call it, land grab university, which basically is profiting from Dakota land and Dakota wealth. I'm speaking today a little bit disoriented and disorganized because I have been spending pretty much since Monday in front of the county jail, Hennepin County Jail in Minneapolis, where 11 of our students were arrested for occupying the administration building on Monday. It's called the Morrill Hall, which is an ironic name considering that it's, of course, named after the 8th university president, James Morrill, but it also revives the history of settler colonialism right here, the Morrill Act of 1862, which basically, after Ramsey, the government of Minnesota signed the Morrill Act of 1862 and gave 120,000 acres of Dakota, stolen Dakota land that was taken forcefully from Dakota people to the University of Minnesota as a land grant. So it was very similar settler colonial practices that we see in Gaza right now, killing Dakota, Ojibwe, and Ojibwe peoples, forced starvation of people, killing their game, the turkeys that people thrived on. And we see very similar practices by the settler colonial state of Israel today. I'm sure many people have seen how people's domestic animals were poisoned by the settlers. And of course, the killing of over 300,000 Palestinians in Gaza, which is what the latest research estimates, because the 42,000 number is a gross underestimation. So with that, I want to first apologize for being a little bit disorganized. I was planning on working on this talk, but it has been impossible exactly because of what has been happening. Our students yesterday were suspended after coming out of jail. Finally, they were suspended by the university and evicted from their student housing. So it has been quite, distressing to deal with our university's support of this genocide. And that is what I want to kind of take as a point of entry to talk about how the universities in the US, for the most part, refuse to divest from the Israeli apartheid and genocide. Our university invests millions of dollars from student tuitions and staff pensions in the state of Israel and weapons manufacturing companies. The state of Minnesota, the State Board of Investments, invests over $4 billion in the genocide in Gaza through weapons manufacturing companies, Israeli bonds and banks, and so on and so forth. Yet they refuse to divest from Israel because of the anti-divestment laws that Minnesota passed a few years ago. And the irony of it is that they're very quick to abide by the sanctions on Iran, both the State Board of Investment and the University of Minnesota. And the reason for the sanctions on Iran, of course, I'm going to talk about that a little bit first. The reason that has been given is nuclear weapons and support of Hezbollah and Hamas. Of course, as Rima said, Hezbollah and Hamas and the concept of political Islam is used as an excuse for sanctions and charges of terrorism when it comes to Iran, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, and many places. The reality of it, though, and the irony and discrepancy is that Iran has 0 nuclear weapons. The Security Council has over and over investigated, and they have found they have not found uranium that is weapons grade. And yet Israel does not even and has not signed into the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, and has 400 nuclear missiles. Yet we do not see any sanctions on the state of Israel, despite the fact that Israel not only is actively committing a genocide in Gaza, actively and illegally occupying land in the West Bank and killing, and has been killing. The killing in South Lebanon did not start just recently. For years, for decades, Israel has been also bombing South Lebanon. So this discrepancy, I think, is something that we should think about. The sanctions in Iran, of course, started soon after the revolution of 1979, but I should actually historicize it more and say that in 1953, when the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh was elected in Iran, the US imposed sanctions. And we have to also, we often don't make that connection to Israel and the formation of Israel. Iran, before 1953, 1953, through a US-backed coup that toppled Mossadegh's government, did not recognize Israel and opposed the inclusion of the state of Israel in the UN. But after the coup, after the Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's regime came to power by the US support, Iran became one of the most important allies of Israel, and of course, practically a US base in the region. And it was not until 1979 and the revolution of 1979, and I was a kid in those years, but I exactly remember the slogans of during the Shah's regime that Iran has become Palestine. People, why are you sitting? Iran shode Palestine, mardum chera neshestin, which basically talked about which referred to how the Shah's regime was pretty much in solidarity with the state of Israel. And after the 1979 revolution and the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the sanctions immediately were imposed. And of course, in 1980, there was the 8-year war with Iraq, which killed millions of Iranians and Iraqis. And at that point, of course, the US was supporting and sending military support to Saddam Hussein. And this was, of course, before Saddam Hussein became the enemy and was hunted and and then there was a regime change in Iraq, of course, after many, many years of sanctions. So the sanctions basically have been a war by another name. Even the 8-year war that was practically waged by the US on the people of Iran and the people of Iraq, and that the sanctions have created warlike conditions in Iran. And at different points, sanctions have increased or they have eased. But the point of sanctions supposedly is to cripple or to basically punish the state, but they do not harm the elites or the state. The most devastating effects of sanctions have been on the people of Iran. I lost my sister on October 22 of 2015, and it was exactly because of the lack of access to chemo, to life-saving medications, and also the Stuxnet virus that the state of Israel sent to all the computers in Iran that worked with nuclear energy, which meant that all radiotherapy machines were shut down, and my sister's radiotherapy was disrupted, and they had to do radiotherapy without a machine that wasn't computerized, an old machine, which burned her lungs and caused 3 surgeries. And my sister is one among the million of Iranians who are paying the price for the U.S. sanctions on the Iranian people. And, she could afford to a certain point the chemo medicine that her children got from the black market, but there are millions of people who do not have access or cannot afford even to buy that medicine. So the debilitating and murderous effects of the sanctions on Iran don't seem to register as war or violence, but they are. And sanctions and military attacks are both strategies of war that legitimize under the threat of terrorism, support for, Hamas and Hezbollah, and also the supposed protection of the international community. So the Obama administration actually imposed the harshest sanctions before Trump, and he called it crippling sanctions. And those were, before Trump, like I said, the harshest sanctions in the history of the U.S. sanctions on Iran. And in 2010, he signed the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act of 2010, or CISADA, which basically imposed new restrictions that devastated the Iranian economy. And of course, it was later that under Obama, the JCPOA in 2012 lifted some, but not all of the sanctions. And then the Trump reversed the JCPOA and imposed the maximum pressure, which have been continuing under Biden's administration. Biden, when he was running for president, he had promised to lift the sanctions, but he didn't, and the sanctions stay in place. So I won't talk about the, of course, medical and environmental effects of sanctions, which are devastating. But I also want to say that the sanctions, exactly because of the devastating economic conditions that give rise, of course, to sanctions, profiteering, and corruption, have created so much discontent in Iran. The protests, the water protests, the unions protesting, all the protests that we have been seeing, which the U.S. media packages as basically, protests against hijab, which, of course, during the woman life freedom happened, but they don't talk about the devastating economic situation in Iran. And of course, because of the history and intensification of both U.S. and Israel meddling in Iran. Israel has actually working through proxies in Iran, several explosions, killing of Iranian scientists, and provoking, or hijacking the legitimate protests of the Iranian people. When there are protests, the Iranian state actually criminalizes Iranian protesters and accuses them of collusion and working with the foreign governments, the U.S. and Israel, of course. So the sanctions have made also any kind of dissent impossible. And this is, it is exactly because of Iran's also support or, for its own geopolitical gains, the Iranian state's support for Hamas and Hezbollah, that some segments of the Iranian society have developed an anti-Palestinian and anti-Lebanese sentiments, slogans that you hear sometimes in the protests, "Na Gaza, na Lebanon, janam fadai Iran, neither Gaza nor Lebanon, I sacrifice my life for Iran," come exactly from this, the kind of discontent that is instigated by the U.S. sanctions and by Israeli pressure. And I have to also say that the sanctions are also very much informed with the Begin Doctrine, Menachem Begin in 82, which basically legitimize any kind of attack or sanctions for any, basically allegations of possession of weapons. So these sanctions have been giving rise to discontent. And that is why I think the Iranian state knows that it is in a very vulnerable position and it doesn't really want a war with Israel. We have seen that Israel has provoked Iran over and over. The assassination of multiple nuclear scientists, bombing the Iranian embassy in Syria, which is technically Iranian soil, killing Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on Iranian soil, sending missiles to Iran, killing 300,000 Palestinians, killing thousands of Lebanese people, and killing Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and then Yahya Sinwar. The Israeli state is provoking Iran but Iran has been just kind of sending symbolic, in a sense, sending missiles as a symbolic way until it sent, the Iranians say sent almost 200 missiles fired at Israel. And I want to say that if there is a war, the regional war, it is Israel's war. It's the US and Israeli war in the region. It is not a war that Iran starts. It's a war that is started exactly because of the provocations, because of Israel's dreams of, the secular colonial expansion and the greater Israel. And this regional war, of course, benefits Israel and legitimizes the killing of Palestinians, the killing of Lebanese people, people of Yemen and Syria, and the rest of the region once this war becomes a regional war. So I want to emphasize that the internal discontents in Iran, along with the economic situation, have put Iran in a position where, many of us, I was, in a sense, hoping that Iran would defend the people of Palestine or the people of Lebanon when Israel is waging such an uneven war. It's not even a war, it's a genocide, as many have argued. But we all know that Iran is a situation that Israel wants a war in Iran, and if Iran basically responds and is dragged into this war, it would basically would be pretty much the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the dreams of regime change that the US, or not dreams, the plans of regime change that the US has been planning. I also want to say a few words about the Biden administration's regime, because we're getting close to the elections. And of course, Harris has said that she is going to continue Biden's policies. Biden keeps sending weapons, troops, and billions of dollars in aid to Israel. I think over $20 billion in military aid has been sent in the last year to Israel by the Biden administration. In addition to that, Biden has sent troops without congressional approval, which means that Biden has practically entered U.S. into a war, because if Iran in a response hits a military target in Israel, and unlike Israel, which is killing civilians, Iran has only targeted military targets in Israel. Imagine if an American troop gets killed, and Netanyahu, of course, would love that, because that means that the U.S. would enter a war with Iran. That would mean basically inevitably that there will be a regional war. And let's not forget that without this unconditional U.S. support, Israel would not have been able to continue this genocide against the people of Gaza, or the massacres in Lebanon, or Syria and Yemen. And without the U.S.'s air defense, Israel would not have been able to shoot down a large number of Iranian missiles. So what I want to end with is to emphasize, unfortunately, exactly because of the Israeli propaganda, and Israel spends so much money on propaganda by its military. There's a Israeli state feminism kind of brand that shows military officers, IOF officers, speaking in fluent Farsi on TikTok and so on and so forth, and saying to Iranian women, you too can be liberated and not wear hijab and defend your country like us, the women of so-called IDF. And all this is exactly this kind of propaganda, and the role of the Iranian diaspora. I don't think we can minimize that. Unfortunately, we saw how that worked in Iraq after years and years of sanctions that created so much discontent and created the conditions for the US occupation of Iraq. There are segments of the opposition among the Iranian diaspora who are pro-Israel. The dethroned Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, is basically building a base in the US, and they're very much pro-Israel. And I think what is important is to emphasize that our struggles are, for liberation are not separate from each other, whether it's the Iranian people's struggle for liberation, the people of Lebanon and the people of Palestine, people of Syria, that we cannot separate our struggles from each other. And we know that so much of the anti-Palestinian sentiments, of course, have to do with the current situation, but also the anti-Arab sentiments among some Iranians or the Iranian nationalist discourses, which have to do a lot with the history of colonial divide and conquer in the region. So I want to end with that, because I think sometimes people conflate, of course, the idea of the state and the people, or kind of separate them in the context of the regime change discourses when appropriate. But I think a very relational approach that connects the emergence of the movements and struggles. And like Rima said, I also want to emphasize that it is not because of the emergence of Hamas or Hezbollah that Israel started attacking. The Israeli aggression and occupation of Palestine goes long before 1980s, of course, and of same thing with the Iranian context, that the sanctions on Iran started before the formation of Hamas and Hezbollah, yet the legitimization of the sanctions are in the name of support for terrorism in the region, and so on and so forth. So it is important to, I think, keep in mind that the idea that Rima exactly said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, is a fallacy. And that is unfortunately what the US and Israeli propaganda machines are banking on in the case of the Iranian diaspora, to create to make the conditions suitable for a regime change in Iran. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Shaksali. So we have about 20 minutes for questions and answers, and I already have several questions lined up, but I would encourage people who want to ask questions and haven't uploaded yet to do so. The first question I wanted to direct to you was originally asked to Professor Majed, but I think that all of you have spoken in different ways about this topic. And the question is from Fawzia Hussein. Dr. Majed, I really appreciate your point about the humanitarian frame reducing life to bare life, and therefore being part of the dehumanizing apparatus. You mentioned how it erases social life, but it also seems to erase political life. Is it possible for Arabs, Muslims to have politics anymore? Or is it that something that has been robbed from us as all groups become framed as the object that must be destroyed?
Should I go first, Roy? Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the question and the comment. I think it's important to I mean, of course, wars and genocides, even more, of course, disrupt all type of life. I mean, it also disrupts natural life. It disrupts the land, the environment. But I think it's also important to remember that social political life, will always take a different. I mean, despite the disruption, it will continue in different forms and shapes. I mean, today there is social life in the displaced communities. It's not like it has disappeared. But I also think that what is important is that this is a point. I mean, these are also historically, these are instances of politicization, and this is what we're seeing with a generation, generations of students in Europe and in the US and across the world that is being politicized around this genocide and how it's unfolding. And it's the same thing here. I mean. And this is the irony of Israel thinking that they will get away with this. I mean, there are generations now of young people who feel very oppressed, who are have lived through these wars, lost so much, lost family, lost homes, etc. And these are going to be politicized in different ways, of course. So I don't think that there's no future for politics. But I also want to say a point here that is important. That is the context of, or the timing of this genocide in the context of a region that has been going through a very severe episode of counter-revolution, following the waves and the uprising and revolutions wave in 2011 and then 2019. And it's important to note, I mean, what Sima was mentioning is about how Israel addresses the people of the region as if they are our liberators, right? I mean, it's the same thing. They also have people who speak to us in Arabic telling us, we are going to liberate the women from Hamas and Hezbollah, and I mean, all sorts of things like that. What we don't say is that actually Israel was the biggest supporter of regimes and against popular uprisings, right? So it is very far from being a progressive force in the region. Actually, it is a counter-revolutionary, regressive, settler colonial, if you insert the words you want, force in this region. And it was, it was actually because of the aftermath of the counter-revolutions that the Abraham Accords went through, with Bahrain first. So it's also very important when we talk about this context to remember that, I mean, even within Palestine, there was an uprising in 2018, 2019, and then 2020 with Talat, etc. So these are not dead populations. These are populations that have dynamics and have their own internal contradictions and have, their progressive forces and people that are calling for a better life. And Israel is always siding with the enemy, right? Whether it's the local regime or the patriarchal system or you name it. So I mean, this is just an important note to backfire all these arguments about Israel being progressive and here to liberate us and give us a better life.
Sima, Sally, would you like to pitch in?
Sima, if you like, and then me. Yeah.
Sure. I actually, the only questions I see, I don't think I see the question that was read, but if I understand the question correctly, I want to say something about the notion of bare life, which is basically how some theorists have described the situation even before the genocide in Palestine, that people are reduced to bare life using Agamben's notion of homo sacer. I think what we also, and this is the title of my book, Politics of Rightful Killing, which is that there is this concept of actually rightful killing, which is that populations that produce in the name of rights, but become killable exactly because of those rights. And we see that in what Rima was just talking, this idea that certain populations that are seen as apt for democratization, for liberation, and so on and so forth, but it is exactly in the name of giving them or granting them those rights that they become killable through sanctions, through wars, right? Because on one hand, talking about Gaza, Israel is claiming that, we are going to free you from Hamas, right? But at the same time, it is dropping bombs on the very people that it claims to be liberating. Or in the case of Iran, the US on one hand, Obama, like I said, the harshest sanctions in the history of sanctions, while at the same time Obama was giving access to internet to Iranians to circumvent the Iranian state's censorship because of the freedom and democratization. So this kind of discrepancy is also something that I think we need to think about, that it is not just a concept of bare life that helps us understand the situation, but it is really how the notion of rights is actually, and liberation and liberal notions of freedom are used to make certain populations killable, exactly in the name of rights. So I don't know if I get close to your question, but I think we need to really think about, and Remo talked about humanitarianism and the contradictions in claims of humanitarianism, which is basically the same logic.
Okay, I want look today, as I said, the genocide is not only against Palestinians, but really about any logic of how we enhance our humanism. And if I consider the universality of human rights or Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a bottom line between humanity, in that case, I think our duty today is to remove the Western referentialities of universality of human rights. They failed by being terribly colonial, by seeing us as a body not worthy to have a political identity, a bare life, as Seema said, so I think today it's a chance to bring universality of human rights through South. Today is South Africa is a custodian, maybe, of the right of self-determination and other principle of human rights. And Chile, I mean, I was amazed by the statement of Chile in ICC about illegality of the Israeli occupation. So I think I need to save the universality of human rights by removing the Western referentiality of this human rights. And I'm waiting to see a German, if you like, Stiftons come to see us at Lebanon and to say, yeah, we need to defend the woman rights, and say, what about the Gazan woman? So I will tell them, if they don't have a statement, a clear statement, I should tell them, take your money and go and liberate yourself from your racism and anti basic violation of liberal principles and universality of human rights. So if you like, this is how I see one of the issues at stake today. Now, I would like to reply to a question about, say, how we have, as a sociologist, a liberation position through sociology, through our position as a student. Let me say that actually we need we need all to work on two levels. In the levels where really have a critical theory clearly to define what is the nature of this Palestinian-Israeli conflict as a settler colonial conflict, as apartheid. I think Arij Sabbagh Khouri made amazing contribution in this regard. For instance, I forgot really to mention here in my presentation, and in the same time, so this is a level is very important. but there is another level of to say, look, what can be a solution? Is the solution of rejecting the other completely? Is there a possibility of dialogue, of negotiation? Is there a possibility of moving from modus vivendi to more a logic of not zero-sum game, either them or us? I think really this is very important, that we think that it's not only we are critical thinking and we stop here. We need to find a kind of a solution to this bloody Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And this is why somebody like me, who is a fervent supporter of BDS, I don't understand BDS at all in individual levels. I am in favor of encounter with Israeli, with those I like and those who don't like. If this can advance, if you like, a kind of the end of this genocidal and fascist mentality of eliminating the other, if you like. So this is what I would like, if you like, to work on these two levels. I stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question for the panelists, just to make sure that you see the question, I posted it in our chat. It's the last thing posted there. How have existing solidarity's resistance in the region been reshaped by the genocide and escalating Israel's state aggression across the region? I think that all of you addressed it in various ways, and I would be curious to hear your takes on it.
In any particular order?
You're welcome to be the first.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've already spoken to that effect. I think, yeah, I mean, of course, this war or this genocide has reshaped many of the local dynamics in terms of solidarity's resistance. I don't want to draw, to romanticize too much. Of course, there is a lot of solidarity and there is a lot of, support for the resistance, even from people like myself who have been, outspoken in critiquing the organizations today undertaking the resistance. But it's very clear for a lot of people that there is an aggressor, and that it is our right to resist and defend ourselves. On the other hand, this has also created new tensions and a shift in a lot of internal dynamics, which vary from one place to the other. But I highlight the intentional role of Israel in actually playing on these internal divisions in order, for its own interest, of course. And actually not just Israel, but the US as well, and the European, many of the Western European countries. So yes, it is a very complex situation. It is a situation that, cannot be understood in a simple way, but it's heartwarming to see that at the popular level, of course, I mean, at the level of the regimes, I don't need to tell you, it is, it's shameful. But at the popular level, I think we have seen, a large wave of solidarity and support that is very important at this point.
There is a question for me about the spatiocide.
Please.
Should I? Yeah. Okay. So actually, if you like, genocide is much higher. You eliminate any your enemy as an ethnic group, as a national group, etc. Once you have a genocide, it entails all type of sides: spatiocides, economicides, urbanicides, as you see, a total destruction of Gaza and in the south of Lebanon now, in an area of south of Lebanon. It's politicized, killing political leaders and so on. So if you like, if you like, that when I forged this concept, spacocide, is to show that in fact it's a very subtle technique of this Ashkenazi Israeli Jews, if you like, that they are middle class European, so sensitive not to see blood. So what they will do will make their adage is more land and less people. And spacocide is a deliberate way of making the Palestinian land unlivable, so people cannot live. I show this really. You can refer to my article in Current Sociology about this, where I show in a very detailed way how they don't give Palestinian work permit, not work permit, housing permit, and so on. So you cannot you cannot live there. So and expel the Palestinian from Jerusalem because their center of life is not Jerusalem but West Bank or Gaza. So many racist legal arrangements to make the living is to make the Palestinian unlivable. So this is why the Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been for a long time, before 2000, under the category low-intensity conflict, under the radar of our eyes. So there is no news about it. There is because we often count casualties, but we don't count how many acre of land confiscation, dispositions, and so on. So if you like, this is where spacocide as a concept was very important to say that don't count casualties, count also how much land has been stolen. Okay, so if you like, this is why I think Israel is not anymore with the demographic transformation of Israel and is not satisfied with the spacocide, wanted really to eliminate. And you have now part of the Israeli, they have the fantasia of areas Israel and reoccupying the south of Lebanon and even reach until from river to sea, if you like. But this time the river is Euphrates. And you should remember that until today is in the chart of Likud that you have this slogan from river to the sea. Thank you.
Yeah. Sima, I'll give you really time for a brief comment because we are past our time.
Sure, thank you. I just want to respond to the previous question that Remo responded to. And I think it really, when we talk about the region, it depends on where you are. Like I said, exactly because of the Iranian state's claim, at least of supporting Palestine and Lebanon, the dynamics that I explained earlier, which is that because people, some people, not all, are very, in a sense, allergic to whatever the state says, have developed kind of anti-Palestinian and anti-Lebanese sentiments, and they're saying, well, we are basically suffering under the this economic conditions. Why is money going to Palestine or Lebanon? But also, I want to also say that without romanticizing, there are many feminist groups that I am in touch with, and they are very much connecting the struggle for women's liberation in Iran to the struggle of the people of Palestine and the people of Lebanon, and those solidarities are in a sense, revived more than before during this genocide. One last very quick comment is about the BDS that Sari mentioned. I think, some people are under the false impression that the BDS is basically a blanket boycott from anything or anyone who's from Israel. That's not the case. There are many people who are Israeli who are supporting BDS, and there are many people, outside in academic institutions. This doesn't mean lack of dialogue. It means basically boycotting and divesting and imposing sanctions on institutions that are complicit with the Israeli state's apartheid and genocide. And that includes many Israeli institutions and universities, such as, for example, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where our colleague Nader Shalhoub-Kevorkian was arrested for speaking her mind. And so I think it is important to say that BDS is an important strategy, and it has actually been effective in undermining the Israeli hegemony in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima. I believe that as an Israeli, I embody the fact that the point that you are making. I would like, we are 5 minutes past our time. I would like to thank profusely to our three panelists who just spoke beautifully and engaged in an extremely intriguing, rigorous conversation, to the Sociology for Palestine organizers who put this event together, and to the many attendees who showed up today and stayed with us till this point. At some point, we had more than 100 attendees. If we don't have many reasons for hope these days, but here is one, that people care, and that there is the constituency in the ASA that is dedicated to change. Thank you.